There are 23 new red spells in Magic the Gathering's Foundations set. It's time to rank every last one of them, starting with the commons. Courageous Goblin is a 1 in a red creature goblin. Whenever this creature attacks while you control a creature with power 4 or greater, this creature gets +1/+0 and gains menace until the end of the turn, and it's a 2/2. Goblins have a very deep creature pool and very often go wide instead of tall. This seems like an okay early play in a limited format, but I don't think it has legs in Commander. This is a hard no. Crackling Cyclops is a 2 in a red creature Cyclops wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +3/+0 until the end of the turn, and it's a 0/4. The wizard creature type is relevant, but this really lends itself to a spell slinging deck. I don't think it's the best payoff because it doesn't have any evasion, but as a first option in one of those lists, maybe a list where you're really heavy in artifacts, since this triggers on non-creature spells, this is certainly an option. I'm gonna place this in Jank. Goblin Borders is a 2 in a red creature goblin pirate. The raid trigger says, this creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if you attacked this turn, and it's a 3/2. In the black video, I talked about how raid is kind of unreliable. In red, it becomes more reliable than ever. It's a quite aggressive color, generally. The payoff, having this turn into a 4/3 instead of a 3/2, gives this okay stats. The goblin and pirate creature types are relevant. It only needs to enter instead of being cast, so you can do reanimation things. I'm gonna put this in Jank. Goblin Surprise is a 2 in a red instant. Choose one. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until the end of the turn. Create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. This is the exact same spell as You See a Pair of Goblins from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set. The fact that this is instant speed is the big deal here. It advances basically every go wide strategy if you're doing a bunch of ETB things with Perforos, if you're doing goblin things, if you have a wide board state, you can overrun them, kind of, with that +2/+0. This is a Fringe card. Real quick, right now, subscribe to the channel. I've done 3 colors already, I've got green on the way, and a bunch more Commander content in the pipeline. You won't want to miss it. Sower of Chaos is a 3 in a red creature devil. For 2 in a red, target creature can't block this turn, and it's a 4/3. The stats are okay for a 4-mana creature, but the cost of this ability is too much. If this was target creature can't be blocked, or if this was maybe a single red for the ability, we could have a conversation about it, but that's not the case. This is a hard no. Gorehorn Raider is a 4 in a red creature minotaur pirate. The raid trigger says, when this creature enters, if you attacked this turn, this creature deals 2 damage to any target, and it's a 4/4. This seems pretty playable in a minotaur deck, but that's about it. The dealing 2 damage thing is pretty good in the limited format where there's a bunch of 2 toughness creatures, but in Commander, that's a little bit small ball. You might just be angering somebody when you don't have to. I'm gonna put this in Jank, just because it's a minotaur. Incinerating Blast is a 4 in a red sorcery. This deals 6 damage to a target creature. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. This is straight up too expensive to be playable in Commander, especially because it only targets creatures. I like the ability to go through your deck more, but 5 mana is too much for this effect. It's a hard no. Bolt Wave is a single red sorcery. Bolt Wave deals 3 damage to each opponent. This is a low mana value investment to deal what could be 9 total damage to your opponents at a normal Commander table. It's going to be good in burn decks if you need to deal damage to your opponents to turn your Commander on or do the thing, like in Rakdos Lord of Riots. It's going to fit in there. It enables enough strategies. It's a single mana, which is great to see. This is going to be Fringe. Bulk Up is a 1 in a red instant. Double target creature's power until the end of the turn, and it has flashback for 4 and 2 red. Above all else, I think this is a very fun spell. It's going to be great in stompy decks generally, but if you can manage 8 mana to cast it on the same creature twice, that's double the double power, which is pretty cool. What puts this over the top for me is that it doesn't have to be a target creature you control. You can knock somebody out of the game by doubling the power of a creature attacking one of your opponents. That level of flexibility raises the fun and power level of that card for me. I'm going to put this in nice. Goblin Negotiation is an X and 2 red sorcery. Goblin Negotiation deals X damage to target creature. Create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to that creature this way. This is only playable in decks that want to go wide or goblin decks. Other than that, it's a very inefficient piece of removal. What's great about this is that the target creature doesn't have to be an opponent's. If you have a 1/1 goblin on the battlefield, you can cast this for 10 mana and trade your 1 goblin for 8. That's 8 ETB triggers, that's 8 goblins that you can now double with Krenko, whatever the case may be. I'm still not sure it's even the best option in those decks, but it's certainly worth considering. I'm gonna put this in Jank. Slumbering Cerberus is a 1 and a red creature dog. This creature doesn't untap during your untap step. The morbid trigger says, at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, untap this creature, and it's a 4/2. The stats are there for a 2-drop in a limited deck to trade favorably with a higher mana value thing, but in Commander, this is probably gonna be a 1/1 in most cases, and it doesn't even untap unless you have that morbid creature if you swing in. I'm gonna put this as a hard no. Fiery Annihilation is a 2 and a red instant. Fiery Annihilation deals 5 damage to target creature. Exile up to 1 target equipment attached to that creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. I think this will excel more in local metas where you have a player or players with an equipment deck. This being an instant speed 2-for-1 against those strategies is pretty powerful, and 5 damage to a target creature isn't nothing either. It's good that this is instant speed. Like I said, 5 damage is a decent amount, and if you are able to get the additional value by exiling that piece of equipment, you're just going to be in bliss. I'm gonna put this in Fringe. Fire Spitter Whelp is a 2 and a red creature dragon with flying. Whenever you cast a non-creature or dragon spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent, and it's a 2/2. These pinging effects are always going to have some place in Commander. The spell slinging burn type of decks are going to like this as a way to deal that ping of damage every time you cast one of those spells, but the fact that this engages with the dragon element too, not to mention that it's a 2/2 flyer, elevates it a little bit for me. I guess it's also not restricted to instants and sorceries, that's just where my mind goes for the spell slinging thing. You could do artifacts or enchantments, not that red is usually doing enchantment things, but this is pretty powerful. It's a flyer, which is relevant. I'm gonna place this in Fringe. Battlesong Berserker is a 3 and a red creature human berserker. Whenever you attack, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains menace until the end of the turn, and it's a 3/4. This is basically the same thing as Most Valuable Slayer was in Duskmourn, but instead of first strike, this gives menace. It's up in the air about which keyword is better, but it's not particularly relevant because MVS has not seen Commander play. I don't think this should either. This is a hard no. Strongbox Raider is a 2 and 2 red creature orc pirate. The raid trigger says, when this creature enters, if you attacked this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card, and it's a 5/2. The 5 power ain't nothing here on a 4 mana creature, and like I said, the raid mechanic is much easier to trigger in red than it is in other colors. The payoff is solid too, letting you see 2 cards even though you can only play 1. This does enough to be at least considered in orc and pirate decks. I'm gonna place this in Jank. Dragon Trainer is a 3 and 2 red creature human. When this creature enters, create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying, and this is a 1/1. Another moment of honesty for you. Since starting this channel, I realize I have a pretty big bias towards dragons, which I did not realize before then. That may skew my rating, but I stand by it. The 2 bodies is good. A 4/4 flyer is pretty strong. 4 power is the trigger for things like Ferocious, and I especially like this as kind of a puzzle because it's an enters trigger. If you can blink it or bounce it often and get more and more 4/4 dragons on the battlefield, that's a pretty fun way to build a deck. I'm gonna place this in Nice. Kellen Planar Trailblazer is a single red legendary creature human fairy scout with a lot of words. For 1 and a red, if Kellen is a scout, it becomes a human fairy detective and gains whenever Kellen deals damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. For 2 and a red, if Kellen is a detective, it becomes a 3/2 human fairy rogue and gains double strike. It's a 2/1. So the joke is, after 6 mana of investment, this deals combat damage to a player 2 times, you get 2 impulse draws. Is investing 6 mana into a single creature what I really want to be doing though? Not so much. I think this is a fun build around, but it definitely feels more tailored towards other constructed formats. I'm gonna place this in Jank. Sear Slicer Goblin is a 1 and a red creature goblin warrior. The raid trigger says, at the beginning beginning of your end step. If you attacked this turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token, and it's a 2/1. I think the worst case scenario for this card is you attack with a single goblin and it replaces itself on your end step. That's a pretty decent place to be. You can get your ETB triggers, you can flood the board with goblins, albeit a little bit slowly, but the fact that this is 2 mana makes this pretty playable for me. I'm going to put this as Fringe. Dropkick Bomber is a 2 and a red creature goblin warrior. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. For a single red, until end of turn, another target goblin you control gains flying, and when this creature deals combat damage, sacrifice it, and it's a 2/3. The Lord effect for your goblin decks feels pretty good. It also gives you a way to push your damage through to players if someone else has a big board state of creatures that are bigger than your goblins. Even though they get sacrificed, goblins tend to replace themselves pretty quickly, and that might not even matter because you won the game already. I think this also gives you a little bit of an interesting deck building angle by maybe adding some sacrifice payoffs where this can really pop off. This is going to be a very fun spell to play with. It's very tailored towards goblins though, so this is Fringe. Electro Duplicate is a 2 and a red sorcery. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this token. It has flashback for 2 and 2 red. This is a combo piece just like Molten Duplication and others on something like a dual caster mage. But if you're not into combos, this is still going to do work in decks with enters triggers or attack triggers if you want to deal combat damage to players or sacrifice things. This does a whole lot, and the fact that this is so cheap right now, I'm going to put this as a chase card. Take a look at it. Twin Flame Tyrant is a 3 and 2 red creature dragon with flying. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead, and it's a 3/5. This is great in your combat damage decks. This is great in your burn decks. Any deck that wants to be dealing damage is going to be more than happy to have this effect. The fact that it's stapled onto an effectively 6/5 flyer is really strong as well. This is for sure a chase card. It elevates a whole lot of common strategies. Yeah, let's get it up there. Rite of the Dragon Caller is a 4 and 2 red enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. I don't think I overcorrected because I called out my bias earlier, but this is really a do nothing permanent unless you followed it up with instants and sorceries probably on the same turn. It being 6 mana makes that a little bit difficult to do, but if you are able to do that, you're flooding the skies with massive dragons, you're gonna take over the game. If you aren't leaning into instants and sorceries, or you play this and it gets removed immediately, that's a super big bummer. I'm gonna put this as a Fringe card. Chandra Flameshaper is a 5 and 2 red legendary planeswalker Chandra. The +2 ability says add 3 red mana, exile the top 3 cards of your library, choose one, you may play that card this turn. The +1 ability, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. The -4 ability says Chandra deals 8 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers, and it's a 6 loyalty planeswalker. This has everything you want, even though it's attached to a pretty expensive permanent. The card advantage with the plus ability, especially combined with the mana it gives you as well, is pretty potent. The fact that the +1 ability is a positive ability at all is worth noting. That's really strong, and you can ultimate it the same turn you cast it if you need some removal. This is another chase card for sure. This is a big bomb of a play, and I really like it. Here it is in chase. That wraps up all the new red spells in this here Foundations set. This is a little more bottom heavy than the rest that we've gone through so far, but I think the top end is definitely more fun. I want to hear what you think. What did I get totally wrong? And as you're commenting, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Like the video, but only if you liked the video, and I'll catch you next time for some more monkeying around.